The history of the Philippines is believed to have begun with the arrival of the first humans using rafts or primitive boats at least 67,000 years ago, as the 2007 discovery of Callao Man suggested. Negrito tribes first inhabited the isles. Groups of Austronesians later migrated to the islands. Eventually various groups developed, separated into hunter-gatherer tribes, warrior societies, petty plutocracies and maritime-oriented harbor principalities, which eventually grew into kingdoms, rajahnates, kingdoms, wangdoms and sultanates. These small nations were either greatly influenced by Hindu religions, literature and philosophy from India, Islam from Arabia, or were Sinified tributary states allied to China. The nations included the Indianized Rajahnates of Butuan and Cebu, the dynasty of Tondo, the August kingdoms of Masapan and Manila, the Kaydachen of Madras, the Sinified Wangdom of Marawi, the Wangdom of Pangasinan, as well as the Muslim Sultanates of Sulu, Lanao and Maguindanao. These small maritime states flourished from the first millennium. These kingdoms traded with what are now called China, India, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. The remainder of the settlements were independent barangays allied with one of the larger states. The first recorded visit by Europeans is the arrival of Ferdinand Magellan. He sighted Samar Island on March 16, 1521 and landed the next day on Homonhon Island, now part of Guyuan, eastern Samar. Spanish colonization began with the arrival of Miguel López de Legazpi's expedition on February 13, 1565 from Mexico. He established the first permanent settlement in Cebu. Much of the archipelago came under Spanish rule, creating the first unified political structure known as the Philippines. Spanish colonial rule saw the introduction of Christianity, the code of law, and the oldest modern university in Asia. The Philippines was ruled under the Mexico-based Viceroyalty of New Spain until the advent of Mexican independence, after which the colony was directly governed by Spain. Spanish rule ended in 1898 with Spain's defeat in the Spanish-American War. The Philippines then became a colony of the United States. American rule was not uncontested. The Philippine Revolution had begun in August 1896 against Spain, and after the defeat of Spain in the Battle of Manila Bay began again in earnest, culminating in the Philippine Declaration of Independence and the establishment of the First Philippine Republic. The Philippine-American War ensued, with extensive damage and death, and ultimately resulting in the defeat of the Philippine Republic. The United States established the insular government to rule the Philippines. In 1907, the elected Philippine Assembly was convened as the lower house of a bicameral legislature, and in 1916 the U.S. federal government formally promised independence in the Jones Act. The Philippine Commonwealth was established in 1935, as a 10-year interim step prior to full independence. Before independence, World War II began and Japan occupied the Philippines. After the end of the war, the Treaty of Manila established an independent Philippine Republic. In 1972, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos imposed martial law. Following the assassination of the Ninoy Aquino, Marcos held snap elections in 1986 and subsequently fled the country during the People Power Revolution, which installed Cory Aquino as president and re-established democracy. In the 21st century, the Philippines is the 12th most populous country of the world, part of ASEAN, a key ally of the United States, with an economy dominated by fishing and agriculture, with a growing business process outsourcing industry and nearly 10% of the population abroad as overseas Filipino workers. Prehistory. The earliest archaeological evidence for man in the archipelago is the 67,000-year-old Callao Man of Cagayan and the Angona petroglyphs in Rizal, both of whom appear to suggest the presence of human settlement prior to the arrival of the Negritos and Austronesian-speaking people. There are several opposing theories regarding the origins of ancient Filipinos. F. Landa Jocano theorizes that the ancestors of the Filipinos evolved locally. Wilhelm Solheim's island origin theory postulates that the peopling of the archipelago transpired via trade networks originating in the Sunderland area around 48,000 to 5000 BC rather than by wide-scale migration. The Austronesian expansion theory states that Malayo-Polynesians coming from Taiwan began migrating to the Philippines around 4000 BC, displacing earlier arrivals. The Negritos were early settlers, but their appearance in the Philippines has not been reliably dated. They were followed by speakers of the Malayo-Polynesian languages, a branch of the Austronesian languages, who began to arrive in successive waves beginning about 4000 BC, displacing the earlier arrivals. Before the expansion out of Taiwan, recent archaeological, linguistic and genetic evidence has linked Austronesian speakers in insular Southeast Asia to cultures such as the Hemidu, its successor the Liangzhu and Dapankeng in Neolithic China. During this Neolithic period, a jade culture is said to have existed as evidenced by tens of thousands of exquisitely crafted jade artifacts found in the Philippines dated to 2000 BC. The jade is said to have originated nearby in Taiwan and is also found in many other areas in insular and mainland Southeast Asia. These artifacts are said to be evidence of long-range communication between prehistoric Southeast Asian societies. By 1000 BC, the inhabitants of the Philippine archipelago had developed into four distinct kinds of peoples. Tribal groups, such as the Eaters, Hananor, Ilongots and the Mangian, who depended on hunter-gathering and were concentrated in forests. Warrior societies, such as the Isnag and Kalinga, who practiced social ranking and ritualized warfare and roamed the plains. The petty plutocracy of the Ifugao, Cordillera or Highlanders, who occupied the mountain ranges of Luzon, and the harbor principalities of the estuarine civilizations that grew along rivers and seashores while participating in trans-island maritime trade. It was also during the first millennium BC that early metallurgy was said to have reached the archipelagos of maritime Southeast Asia via trade with India around 300–700 AD. The seafaring peoples of the islands traveling in balangays began to trade with the Indianized kingdoms in the Malay archipelago and the nearby East Asian principalities, adopting influences from both Buddhism and Hinduism. Pre-colonial period. Initial recorded history during the period of the South Indian Pallava dynasty and the North Indian Gupta Empire. Indian culture spread to Southeast Asia and the Philippines, which led to the establishment of Indianized kingdoms. The end of Philippine prehistory is 900, the date inscribed in the oldest Philippine document found so far, the Laguna copperplate inscription. From the details of the document, written in Kawi script, the bearer of a debt, Namwaran, along with his children Lady Angkatan and Buka, are cleared of a debt by the ruler of Tondo. From the various Sanskrit terms and titles seen in the document, the culture and society of Manila Bay was that of a Hindu Old Malay amalgamation, similar to the cultures of Java, Peninsular Malaysia and Sumatra at the time. There are no other significant documents from this period of pre-Hispanic Philippine society and culture until the Doctrina Christiana of the late 16th century, written at the start of the Spanish period in both native Baybayin script and Spanish. Other artifacts with Kawi script and Baybayin were found, such as an ivory seal from Buchan dated to the early 11th century and the Calatagan pot with Baybayin inscription, dated to the 13th century. In the years leading up to 1000, there were already several maritime societies existing in the islands, but there was no unifying political state encompassing the entire Philippine archipelago. Instead, the region was dotted by numerous semi-autonomous barangays under the sovereignty of competing thalassocracies ruled by datus, Wangs, Rajahs, sultans or lakans, or by upland agricultural societies ruled by petty plutocrats. States such as the Kingdom of Manila, the Kingdom of Taytay and Palawan, the Chieftaincy of Coronado Island ruled by fierce warriors called Tagban were, as reported by Spanish missionaries, mentioned by Nilo S. Ocampo, Namayan, the dynasty of Tondo, the Sinitic Wangdoms of Marayan Pangasinan, the Kadachan of Madras, the Indianized Rajahnates of Butuan and Cebu, and the Muslim sultanates of Maguindanao and Sulu existed alongside the highland societies of the Ifugao and Mangian. Some of these regions were part of the Malayan empires of Srivijaya, Majapahit and Brunei. The Kingdom of Tondo since at least the year 900, the thalassocracy centered in Manila Bay flourished via an active trade with Chinese, Japanese, Malays, and various other peoples in East Asia. Tondo thrived as the capital and the seat of power of this ancient kingdom, which was led by kings under the title Lakan, and ruled a large part of what is now known as Luzon from or possibly before 900 AD to 1571. During its existence, it grew to become one of the most prominent and wealthy kingdom states in pre-colonial Philippines due to heavy trade and connections with several neighboring nations such as China and Japan. In 900 AD, the Lord Minister Jadewar presented a document of debt forgiveness to Lady Angkatan and her brother Buka, the children of Namwaran. This is described in the Philippines' oldest known document, the Laguna copperplate inscription. The Wangdom of Pangasinan or Feng Chihsi Lan in Chinese records, was a sovereign pre-Hispanic Philippine state, notable for having traded with the Kingdom of Ryukyu, Japan, and was a tributary state to Ming China and specialized in the export of turquoise shells, horses and silver. The Chinese records of this kingdom began when the first tributary king, Kamayan, sent an envoy offering horses and silver to the Chinese emperor. The state occupies the current province of Pangasinan. It was locally known the Luyag na Cabalone, with Binalatongan as its capital, existed in the fertile Agno River Valley. Around the same period, the Srivijaya and Majapahit empires arose in Indonesia that extended their influence to much of the Malay archipelago. Urduja, a legendary woman warrior, is believed to have ruled in Pangasinan around the 14th century. The Luyag na Cabalone expanded the territory and influence of Pangasinan to what are now the neighboring provinces of Zambales, La Union, Tarlac, Benguet, Nueva Ecija, and Nueva Vizcaya. Pangasinan enjoyed full independence until the Spanish conquest. In the 16th century, Pangasinan was called the Port of Japan by the Spanish. The locals wore native apparel typical of other maritime Southeast Asian ethnic groups in addition to Japanese and Chinese silks. Even common people were clad in Chinese and Japanese cotton garments. They also blackened their teeth and were disgusted by the white teeth of foreigners, which were likened to that of animals. Also, used porcelain jars typical of Japanese and Chinese households. Japanese-style gunpowder weapons were also encountered in naval battles in the area. In exchange for these goods, traders from all over Asia would come to trade primarily for gold and slaves, but also for deerskins, civet and other local products. Other than a notably more extensive trade network with Japan and China, they were culturally similar to other Luzon groups to the south. The Wangdom of Mai around 1225, the country of Mai, a signified pre-Hispanic Philippine island state centered in Mindoro, flourished as an entrepot, attracting traders and shipping from the Kingdom of Ryukyu to the Yamato Empire of Japan. Chao Jukua, a customs inspector in Fujian province, China, wrote the Jufanji, which described trade with this pre-colonial Philippine state. The Kadachan of Madras. During the 11th century, several exiled Jatis of the collapsing empire of Srivijaya led by Datu Puta led a mass migration to the central islands of the Philippines. fleeing from Rajah Makati, now of the island of Borneo. Upon reaching the island of Panay and purchasing the island from Negrito chieftain Marikudo, they established a confederation of polities and named it the Confederation of Majaros, centered in Aklan, and they settled the surrounding islands of the Visayas. This confederation reached its peak under Datu Padalinog. During his reign, the Confederation's hegemony extended over most of the islands of Visayas. Its people consistently made piratical attacks against Chinese imperial shipping. The Rajahnate of Cebu. The Rajahnate of Cebu was a classical Philippine state which used to exist on Cebu Island prior to the arrival of the Spanish. It was founded by Srilomar, otherwise known as Raja Mutilamaya, a minor prince of the Chola dynasty which happened to occupy Sumatra. He was sent by the Maharaja to establish a base for expeditionary forces to subdue the local kingdoms, but he rebelled and established his own independent Rajahnate instead. This Rajahnate warred against the Magalosh of Maguindanao and had an alliance with the Buchan Rajahnate before it was weakened by the insurrection of Datu Lapu-Lapu. The Rajahnate of Buchan. By year 1011, Raja Sri Bhatta Shajah, the monarch of the Indianized Rajahnate of Buchan, a maritime state famous for its gold work, sent a trade envoy under Ambassador Likan Shia to the Chinese imperial court demanding equal diplomatic status with other states. The request being approved, it opened up direct commercial links with the Rajahnate of Buchan and the Chinese Empire, thereby diminishing the monopoly on Chinese trade previously enjoyed by their rivals, the dynasty of Tondo and the Kampa civilization. Evidence of the existence of this Rajahnate is given by the Buchan silver paleograph. The Sultanate of Lanao. The Sultanates of Lanao in Mindanao, Philippines were founded in the 16th century through the influence of Sharif Kabung Suan, who was enthroned as first Sultan of Maguindanao in 1520. The Maranayos of Lanao were acquainted with the Sultanate system when Islam was introduced to the area by Muslim missionaries and traders from the Middle East, Indian and Malay regions who propagated Islam to Sulu and Maguindanao. Unlike in Sulu and Maguindanao, the Sultanate system in Lanao was uniquely decentralized. The area was divided into 4 principalities of Lanao, or the Patapang-Ampong-Aranao, which are composed of a number of royal houses with specific territorial jurisdictions within mainland Mindanao. This decentralized structure of royal power in Lanao was adopted by the founders, and maintained up to the present day, in recognition of the shared power and prestige of the ruling clans in the area, emphasizing the values of unity of the nation, patronage and fraternity. The Sultanate of Sulu in 1380, Karim ul-Makdum and Sharif ul-Hashem Sayyid Abu Bakr, an Arab trader born in Johor, arrived in Sulu from Malacca and established the Sultanate of Sulu. This sultanate eventually gained great wealth due to its diving for fine pearls. The Sultanate of Maguindanao. At the end of the 15th century, Sharif Muhammad Kabung Suwan of Johor introduced Islam in the island of Mindanao, and he subsequently married Paramisulai, an Iranian princess from Mindanao, and established the Sultanate of Maguindanao. By the 16th century, Islam had spread to other parts of the Visayas and Luzon. The Bruneian Empire and the expansion of Islam during the reign of Sultan Bolkiah in 1485 to 1521. The Bruneian Empire decided to break the dynasty of Tondo's monopoly in the China trade by attacking Tondo and defeating Datu Gambang, and then establishing the state of Selurong as a Brunei and satellite state. A new dynasty under the Islamized Raja Salalila was also established to challenge the House of Lakangela in Tondo. In addition to establishing the satellite state of Manila, Sultan Bolkiah also married Laila Mekana, the daughter of Sulu Sultan Amir Ulumbra, to expand Brunei's influence in both Luzon and Mindanao. Furthermore, Islam was further strengthened by the arrival to the Philippines of traders and proselytizers from Malaysia and Indonesia. The multiple states competing over the limited territory and people of the islands simplified Spanish colonization by allowing its conquistadors to effectively employ a strategy of divide and conquer for rapid conquest.